Hello and welcome to the commencement lecture on the theme Reimagining Lawyering in a World on Fire, what the pandemic and the protests mean for the future of the global market for corporate legal services, as well as the inauguration of the LLM in Corporate and Financial Law Blended Learning Program. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Professor Prateek Bhattacharya. I'm an assistant professor and assistant dean at Jindal Global Law School, OP Jindal Global University. Let me tell you a little about this program before I hand it over to my other speakers. The LLM in Corporate and Financial Law provides learners with a specialized focus on transactions, markets, and local and global regulatory issues. The program is ideal for dynamic lawyers of tomorrow as it facilitates an understanding of the structure and interplay of corporate and financial law from a 360-degree perspective. Let me tell you about what went behind the making of this program and why this blended learning program is such a unique opportunity for all of you to engage in and to further your legal skills and legal expertise. Areas such as corporate law, financial law are constantly updated. They're undergoing constant change. There's always, with regard to India, there's always a new regulation by the Securities and Exchange Board of India, a new amendment to the SEBI regulations, a new RBI circular, a new judgment of the Supreme Court or the National Company Law Tribunal or the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. As such, it becomes very important for all of us as lawyers, as future legal professionals, as people who will change the dynamics of the legal industry tomorrow, to stay updated and also understand the niche, the nuanced areas of practice within these corporate and financial law. There are little nitty-gritties which are important and which we can't, of course, ignore. There are little side elements, things like a dissenting judgment becoming much more relevant in the future. Things like a particular subclause in a particular amendment, changing the way you are reading that particular law. These little nuances are very important to learn, very important to be aware of, and that is what we at Jindal Global University plan to impart in this blended LLM program. The blended LLM program will comprise a yearly sequential set of courses. The courses in question will start with advanced company law, following which we'll have a practitioner's approach to competition law, where you will study competition law principles, both relevant market, geographic market, merger control, horizontal agreements, vertical agreements, and of course, dominance and abuse of dominance cases. In the first course of advanced company law, we will cover the basics of company law, of corporate jurisprudence, and as well as some certain SEBI regulations and understand in depth how companies work. The third course will be legal research methodology, where we will approach a very typical concept such as legal research, something which all of us would have studied in our very first semester in all our law schools. But we will give a corporate spin to it. How does legal research work in a professional working environment? How does legal research work in a law firm? All of these various facets is something which we will reintroduce when teaching you legal research methodology. The fourth course will be Law and Justice in the Globalizing World, where we will look at the change of globalization and how it's affected the corporate industry, the legal industry, and the operation of multinational corporations. So you might include topics such as bilateral investment treaties, foreign direct investment into India, and investment by Indian companies outside India. The fifth course will be Comparative Public Law, where we will look at the nexus between corporate law and public law and where they meet each other, and where it's important to remember that you cannot have one hand without the other, that you cannot have corporate law without the overall public law concepts. The fifth course will be a specialized course of mergers, acquisitions, and private equity, where you will have an in-depth study into various M&A transactions, negotiations for those M&A transactions, and drafting exercises. Speaking of drafting exercises, the sixth course of commercial contract drafting will give you an in-depth understanding of not just the negotiation of commercial contracts, but also the various boilerplate clauses, the various interpretations which you can take for agreements, for clauses and agreements, and how to play around with words and with contractual terms in your favor and in your client's favor. The seventh course of Law of Banking and Finance, that will be the eighth course. The eighth course of Law of Banking and Finance will give you an in-depth study into the law of banking in India. Who is a creditor? What is the role of creditor? What are the options for credit facilities in India and how to avail of them? The ninth course will be law of corporate insolvency, where, of course, given how new the IBC is, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is in India, we will have an in-depth study into what is changing in IBC and why it has been important in India for the IBC regime to even be set up, why it's important, who are the kinds of creditors, who is an operational creditor, who's a financial creditor, and to therefore have a holistic understanding of not just one particular area of law. This program at the end of it will give you a holistic 360-degree understanding of every aspect of commercial law. So you might have something which begins with a simple contractual term. You'll learn how to read it from a competition law perspective. Maybe a simple contractual term from a competition or antitrust perspective may be considered as abusive. Maybe from an insolvency perspective, it's against or in favor of a certain category of creditors. So at the end of this program, you will be able to look at one particular clause, one particular issue, one particular case from various angles. And that is the true definition of a skilled and expertise corporate lawyer. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Falgun Kompani, who will assist me in introducing this blended LLM program. Mr. Falgun is the co-founder of upGrad. He graduated from IIT Delhi and went on to work as a business analyst at Opera Solutions and thereafter as principal at the Parthenon Group, which is an education consulting firm before co-founding upGrad. Falgun?
Thanks a lot, Professor Pratik. Uh, First of all, just to introduce myself, my name is Falgun Kompali and I'm one of the co-founders of upGrad. And as Professor Pratik mentioned, I've been working in education for the last 10 years and I've done a lot of work in emerging markets globally. And I think one of the most exciting things for me about what we are doing here, and this was the vision that we discussed when we first met with Professor Raj also, was that there is some wonderful students and faculty that are teaching on the Jindal Global Law School campus. But there are a lot of lawyers outside who, for whatever reason, in the current situation, for example, because of COVID or even otherwise normal circumstances, are not able to come to campus. So how can we create a world-class online learning experience or a blended learning experience, which we can provide to these learners to make sure that they get the same kind of access to high quality education? So we started with that. And I think over the last 3-4 months, there's been a lot of hard work that has gone in creating this blended learning experience. Professor Pratik, Professor Viswas, Professor Arya from Jindal Global Law School have been leading that initiative to bring the same kind of passion and expertise that they bring to the classroom. And we at upGrad have been working very hard to see how we can create this digital experience where we have put in a lot of effort on high quality content, immersive learning experiences, support services that students need, which include academic support, non-academic support, career support services, deciding various offline interactions that are required to make this program successful. So I think a lot of hard work has gone in, as I said, and we're really excited about bringing this blended learning experience to all of our learners. Finally, I'll close quickly, but I think we are very excited to start this off with 350 learners for the first time. And I think it's been a visionary idea and a visionary launch, thanks to Jindal Global Law School and all the hard work that they've put in. And I think I have no doubt that we have done everything we can to make sure that these learners will have an amazing learning experience over the next 12 months. So welcome to the program, and I'll move on and introduce Ronnie, who is our next speaker. Ronnie is one of the co-founders of upGrad, and he doesn't need much introduction. Everybody knows him. He is a media veteran, has done a lot of work there. Post that, right now he's very involved with upGrad. He also runs the Swadesh Foundation, and he runs youth sports and RSVP. But hand it over to Ronnie for the next segment of the session.
Thank you, Falgun, and thank you, Professor Pratik. Professor Raj, all I can say is, for me, this is a very special moment, and I'll tell you why. I turned and became a first-generation entrepreneur, but when anyone asks me what's one of your deepest regrets if I wanted to carry on and be a professional, I wanted to be a lawyer. And therefore, this is to me, this is really a special moment. That's something that we have nurtured at upGrad and going to be able to do. I think the reason for that is I've always fascinated with the element of law. It forces everyone and all your learners permanently to have a very analytical mind. You need to be a sharp thinker and you need to be a great communication person. And I think you marry all of that. And I think it's important as you take this course today, all of you as our fellow learners, understanding the elements of what it takes to not just understand the element of law, but being able to impart it, being able to communicate it, being able to bring in the community and communicate the very relevance of law is going to be most important. So here's to everyone having very sharp minds, analytical minds, and a very communicative self. Um, At upGrad, we have really invested deeply in the fact that we believe that for everyone, it's now a lifelong learning. I can tell all our fellow panelists here and for all of us, you know, we may be 35, 45, 55, or 65, and we are not going to stop learning. That's the treadmill that's been put on us right now, and every 4 to 5 years. So as Falgun summarized, this is a phenomenal opportunity brought to us really by the OP Jindal University, Global University, that we can get the best of the world and put it into this blended program. So nothing gives us more pride than to really say that we are very privileged to have this. The Jindal Global Law School is an integral part of the overall OP Jindal Global University. And it's ranked one of the #1 universities. And I think the very fact that in our very first blended program, we have 350 learners coming in. And for all of you 350 learners joining in, don't actually even think for a second that you won't get very personalized attention. Because between the technology platform, between what we have lined up with the faculty, and between the blended learning experience, you will get a very personal touch. And I think that's the beauty of this blended course as we go forward. So on behalf of OP Jindal and upGrad, welcome all of you all to this, and it gives us great pleasure to inaugurate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Falgun. I think there are some important points that both Ronnie and Falgun made, particularly with regard to access to education, which Falgun mentioned. And this blended learning program will ensure that regardless of which part of the country you are, or possibly even not in this country, you do have access to this education. So it's really the next level of education and of learning that we are trying to focus on. What Ronnie mentioned, that it's important regardless of which profession you are in, and particularly, of course, in the legal profession, you have to update yourself. You have to keep yourself updated. You need to know the new laws. You need to basically upgrade yourself, for lack of a better term. At this point, I'd like to introduce our founding Vice Chancellor and founding Dean of Jindal Global Law School, Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, who will introduce JGU, JGLS, and the commencement speaker. Professor Raj is a Rhodes Scholar with degrees from 4 different universities across 4 different jurisdictions, namely Delhi University and Loyola College in India, University of Oxford, Harvard University, and the University of Hong Kong. Professor Raj, if you would.
Thank you very much. Well, what an extraordinary moment for me personally to be part of this. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this commencement lecture, and of course the inauguration of the LLM in Corporate and Financial Law, the blended program. For all the learners who have joined this program, congratulations to you. You have made a very important decision in your life at a very critical time, and I can assure you that you have my fullest support to ensure that you will be able to fulfill your dreams and aspirations out of this program. I also want to particularly thank our collaborators from upGrad, both Mr. Ronnie Skruvala as well as Falgun, for their extraordinary leadership, farsightedness, and innovation to be able to build a program of this kind in collaboration with OP Jindal Global University. Let me quickly say that why this moment is very special for me. Well, this university was created through a philanthropic initiative of our founding chancellor and benefactor, Mr. Naveen Jindal. I had the privilege to meet him in the year 2006. But before that, I spent several years initially as a student at Oxford and then at Harvard. During those years, I dreamt about the idea of creating a university, and then led to many things in my life, which took my journey through New York and Tokyo and Hong Kong, all along dreaming about the idea of building a world-class university in India. I moved to India in early 2007, and since then, we began the process of establishing this university. But the reason this is also special is that in our history and journey, we have always maintained that we will be constantly innovating. We will be constantly creating and learning ecosystem, an intellectually vibrant environment that creates a transformative opportunity for all our students, and in this case, what we would like to call you as learners. It is also a special moment because whenever we've had good things happening, we've had David Wilkins around. Let me begin by saying that exactly on 7th August 2009, when the campus where I am right now located had only the first classroom about to be completed, Nothing at all, no faculty, no students, no staff. Professor David Wilkins was here to be part of the Founders' Day celebrations. I kind of tricked him to believe that we are going to have a university here with faculty and students and staff, and we had none on that day. Of course, we grew from 100 students in 2009 to nearly 7,000 students now. And Professor David Wilkins was here last year as a part of our 10th anniversary celebrations and delivered the convocation address. So who else could be better than him to be part of this endeavor? So we are very delighted and indeed fortunate that we have with us as chief guest Professor David Wilkins, who is the Lester Kissel Professor of Law, Director, Center on the Legal Profession, Vice Dean, Global Initiatives on the Legal Profession at Harvard Law School in Harvard University. Beyond all the extraordinary publications and the work that David has done, let me say he is one of the most passionate and committed and dedicated human beings I have ever met in my life. He is constantly inspiring, constantly changing, and most importantly, he has combined the values of public interest and legal education and advancing the cause of corporate legal profession globally. He believes in the idea of globalization, but also constantly recognize the inherent challenges when it comes to global imaginations. He's deeply committed to India and has visited us many times, and I could not have thought of a better person to be able to be the chief guest and deliver the commencement lecture for the LLM program in corporate and financial law blended learning. I also want to quickly say for all the learners that this program is part of an effort to build capacity when it comes to knowledge creation and engaging with some of the most critical ideas in the field of corporate law and financial law. I am confident that at the end of this program, when you receive the degree from OP Jindal Global University, you will be so privileged for the learning that you would have underwent and the kind of opportunity that upGrad and Jindal would have given. So congratulations to all of you, and thank you very much for being part of this commencement lecture. And once again, I would like to congratulate and thank my colleagues at the Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, Professor Vishwas, as well as Professor Prateek, and also the Executive Dean of the Law School, Professor Srijit, and my Registrar, Professor Sridhar, for being part of this initiative. I also want to particularly thank the Director of Law School Admissions, Professor Anand Prakash Mishra, for his support in ensuring that the program is successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj, for that incredibly generous introduction. It is always an honor to be with my friends at Jindal and in India more generally. I've always been very, very honored by my association with this amazing university from the very beginning. And we at Harvard are very honored by our affiliation with its Vice Chancellor, founding Vice Chancellor, Professor C. Raj Kumar. I also want to thank Naveen Jindal and his amazing wife Shalu for their incredible philanthropy that made this possible and for their always warm and generous welcome whenever I'm in India. I'm particularly honored to be here at the launch of this incredible program. It could not be more timely, given the events that I'd like to talk for a few minutes about. And I just want to thank all of the amazing faculty who you've heard from and the incredible entrepreneurial support from the leaders of upGrad who had the vision to see that a blended learning program at this moment in India's history and in the history of the world would be such an important thing to do. Raj asked me to say a few words about the world and about what's happening today. And so I put together a presentation, and I'm going to share my screen since we've now all become Zoom experts in the world today. I have a PowerPoint, which you'll see, which I'll sort of explain as we go along. So I'm now sharing my screen. Okay. This always takes a second, but hold on just 1 second. There we go. Hold on. Why didn't that work? Hold on just 1 second. Not, well, we tested this out. Let's just try this resume slideshow. Ah, here we go. All right. So my presentation is titled Reimagining Lawyering in a World on Fire, What the Pandemic and the Protests Mean for the Global Market for Corporate Legal Services and for Jindal's new LLM program. And I'll try to explain all that in just a second. But I start with this. And in your program, I'm sure you will cover this famous statement by the economist Milton Friedman, who said in 1970 that, quote, the social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. That is what Milton Friedman thought. And quite frankly, although very few companies strictly adhered to this famous aphorism, for over half a century since he said this, few CEOs and even fewer investors and academics disputed the underlying premise that management's primary duty was to maximize shareholder value, and that any apparent deviation from this fundamental principle had to be justified either by it, in other words, think the idea that we do philanthropy because it's goodwill that increases our profits, or expressly declared up front. That is, there's a kind of corporation which you will probably learn about in the United States called a B corporation or a benefits corporation, in which the idea is that they expressly say that something other than shareholder value is going to govern the way the corporation operates. This was the accepted wisdom until a couple of years ago, in which this presumption has been dramatically upended, or at least so it might seem. So in 2018, BlackRock, which you will learn if you don't already know, which is the world's largest asset manager with trillions of dollars under management, declared that it would look beyond the bottom line to invest in businesses that, quote, contribute to society. This was followed up in the United States by the Business Roundtable, which is the kind of US organization into which most large and important businesses belong, amended its definition of the purpose of a corporation to include duties to all of the company's, quote, stakeholders, including customers, employees, suppliers, and even the communities as a whole. And then, oh, by the way, the long-term value to shareholders. This has now moved from what you might call stakeholder theory, which you will learn about, to an emphasis on sustainability. So just in January of this year, 2020, BlackRock issued a second letter that it would immediately stop investing in companies that present, quote, a high sustainability related risk. Remember, BlackRock is the largest investor in the world. And 10 days later, Goldman Sachs, one of the premier investment banks in the world, announced that it would, quote, stop participating in initial public offerings for companies that only had white men on their boards of directors. This was revolutionary. And all of this occurred before, roughly speaking, March 2020, when COVID-19 and the pandemic began to change the world. By highlighting the deep structural inequalities in everything from healthcare to employment, COVID around the world, I'm going to argue, will only accelerate this trend towards a focus on stakeholders and sustainability. And moreover, we now understand that any idea about sustainability isn't just around environmentalism or even things like human rights or human trafficking. It also involves a deep commitment and push towards social justice. So in July of this year, just last month, the World Economic Forum, which most of you know is the most important economic meeting in the world in Davos, called for, quote, a great reset of capitalism in the wake of the pandemic. And this idea has been captured in a very important new book by Harvard Business School and Harvard University professor, the highest honor at our university, Professor Rebecca Henderson, in a new book which she calls Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire, which is where I get the title for my talk, in which she documents that a growing number of C-suite executives at the top of corporations have now understood the unsustainability of the current system of what she calls extractive capitalism, where a smaller and smaller share at the top of society controls an ever larger share of society's resources, which destabilizes the very markets and institutions that businesses ultimately need to survive. This is particularly true, I would argue, in countries like India, where inequality, as we all know, is already so great. And protests over the killing of unarmed Black men in the United States, protests which you have undoubtedly heard about in India and which have now spread around the world, including in Delhi, where many of you are, underscore that sustainability cannot be achieved without confronting racial and social injustice. And once again, this will be even more true in India, where, as we know, communal strife is even more common. Indeed, the parallels between the social justice movements in India and the United States run deep, extending from the reverence that the US civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose March on Washington we just commemorated 2 days ago, the reverence that Dr. King had for Mahatma Gandhi. There's now a recent book by a Black American author named Isabel Stewart Wilkerson, very highly acclaimed. The book is called Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents, which explicitly draws parallels between the struggles for social justice in India and the United States. And right there at Jindal Law School, I am very proud to say Jindal now has a lecturer and a former star student of mine named Anurag Bhaskar, who is using his Harvard LL.M, where he graduated a couple of years ago, and his own heritage to eliminate a pioneering new course called Law, Politics, and Social Transformation. This is moving not just in the realm of rhetoric, but to actually the commitment of resources. And I'll just use my own country as an example. Since the killing of George Floyd in the United States, this connection between social justice, sustainability, and corporations is producing real change. There have been a flurry of statements from every major corporation and more about the importance of racial justice. A sports racing league in my country called NASCAR banned the Confederate flag, which used to be prominently flown at its sporting events. Princeton University, which Raj and many know well, renamed the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy because of Wilson's long history of racism against Black Americans. And the state of Mississippi finally took the stars and bars or the Confederate flag off of its state flag. But we're now seeing corporations are donating hundreds of millions of dollars to civil rights organizations like the Legal Defense Fund, the NAACP, and the Urban League, by companies like Apple, Cisco, Facebook, Verizon, some of the most important companies in the United States. Even more importantly, we are seeing those companies institute what they call supplier diversity initiatives, over $1 billion that companies are pledging to give their business to minority-owned and women-owned companies, including $100 million by Apple, $550 million by PayPal, $400 million by Pepsi. Sephora, the big retailer, has promised to devote 15% of its shelf space to products manufactured by minority-owned enterprises. And we've seen hiring pledges. BlackRock and Adidas have both pledged to increase their hiring of Black Americans by 30% over the next 5 years. And Wells Fargo, one of our biggest banks, said that they're going to double Black leadership in 5 years. And perhaps most of all, investment. And our friends at upGrad know the importance of investors, have promised over $2 billion of new investment in minority communities, including Bank of America, which has promised $1 billion, SoftBank, $100 million. And one of the most successful Black American entrepreneurs, Robert Smith, is urging financial institutions to pledge 2% of their profits to minority communities. And the nonprofit sector is stepping up as well. In June of this year, the Mellon Foundation, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, Doris Duke Foundation, 5 of the most important foundations in the United States, announced a partnership to commit $1.7 billion in new funding to stabilize other nonprofits in the wake of COVID-19. And much of these funds will be targeted towards racial justice initiatives, including a prison library project that I know Raj will find very important that the Mellon Foundation has pledged to do. All of this is creating tremendous demands for well-trained corporate lawyers. That is, just think of all the new legal work that has been created by the COVID-19 crisis around the world. There have been a huge number of new laws, programs, and redesigned institutions from, in my country, the Payroll Protection Plan, which was something like a $2 or $3 trillion plan, to contact tracing for disease, to online courts. Or think about all the corporate policies and practices that have to be now rethought in the wake of COVID, including employment policies, policies around online work, around supply chains, around data privacy and security. Think about what's happening in corporate governance. That stakeholder theory now means that we have to balance shareholder value with stakeholder interests and with sustainability. This was already mentioned. Think about reorganizations that are going on, from bankruptcy and restructuring to strategic acquisitions. And think about the huge number of new public-private partnerships in healthcare and pharmaceuticals and education. And many, many international and global impact compacts, around indicators and mandates, like the UN Global Compact for Corporate Responsibility, or sustainability audits, or laws of prohibiting modern slavery in the supply chains of companies that have been passed in the UK and California. All of these are committing to social justice initiatives and community engagement that I just described. To handle all of this new legal work, companies will need well-trained corporate lawyers. And that's particularly true here in India, where many of these areas of corporate law, as we just heard, are relatively new and evolving rapidly. But these lawyers will have to be trained to do more than simply provide high-quality legal advice. Look, 5 years after that famous statement by Milton Friedman I started my talk with, the social responsibility of businesses to increase profits, there was a philosopher, a prominent philosopher here in the United States named Richard Wasserstrom, who worried that the traditional understanding that lawyers should put the interests of their clients above all others, quote, renders the lawyer at best amoral and at worst more than occasionally immoral in their dealings with the rest of mankind. He said this, quote, role morality encourages lawyers to be competitive rather than cooperative, aggressive rather than accommodating, ruthless rather than compassionate, pragmatic rather than principled. And then he said this, it is neither accidental nor unimportant that these are the same character traits that are emphasized and valued by the capitalistic ethic. Anybody wondering whether this matters need look no further than the actions, or I'd argue the inactions, of some of the world's most prestigious lawyers in everything from the savings and loan crisis in the United States to the collapse of Enron, to the global financial crisis more generally, or to the latest emissions scandals by Volkswagen. In a very famous opinion that you may study by a judge here in the United States called Stanley Sporkin about the billions of dollars that were lost when a savings and loan called Lincoln Savings and Loan went bankrupt due to fraud. He asked this pointed question: where were the lawyers when all of this was going on? I have the privilege of teaching a seminar at Harvard Law School, which I will begin teaching actually next week, with Ben Heineman, who's the legendary former general counsel of General Electric, which at the time was the largest industrial corporation in the world. Written for CEOs in the midst of the financial crisis, Ben argued that, quote, high performance with high integrity were the twin pillars of capitalism. Look, we all know without high performance, companies fail. But here's the point. Without high integrity, they lose the fundamental trust on which capitalism ultimately depends. In 2016, Ben wrote a second book. He's quite an amazing guy, addressed specifically to general counsels of major corporations. This book was called The Inside Counsel Revolution. And this time, he focused on the role of corporate lawyers inside corporations and argued that they had to be both partners and guardians in their corporations. He said, look, GCs have to be partners with their companies. They cannot be, quote, the department of no, saying no to what business leaders want to do all the time. Because if they are, to quote a very famous musical here in the United States you may have heard about called Hamilton, and if you haven't, you can now watch it on streaming on Netflix. It's an amazing show. You won't be, quote, in the room where it happens, meaning the lawyers will be left out of decision making. But here's the point. They can't be the department of yes either. In other words, saying yes to everything business leaders want, no matter how dubious. Because if they do, these days, they risk being themselves indicted and getting their companies in trouble. To manage this tension, the first question Ben asks is that lawyers have to ask, is what the company's trying to do, is it legal? But the last question they must raise is whether what the company wants to do is right. This means to play this role, and the leaders of upGrad just said this, lawyers must understand the company's business and their own responsibility as part of the company's supply chain. Specifically, lawyers must be taught to understand that long-term success for a company requires sustainability in every way. And that in order to show companies how to be sustainable, lawyers who work in their own institutions like law firms must be sustainable businesses too. And again, this is particularly true here in India, whereas I had the privilege of chronicling on our recent book where Professor Raj Kumar wrote a piece, as well as several other professors at Jindal. The book was called The Indian Legal Profession in the Age of Globalization, The Rise of the Corporate Legal Sector and Its Impact on Lawyers in Society. The Indian legal profession is under increasing pressure to perform at a global standard. Moreover, millennials and Gen Zs, of which all of you coming to this program probably belong to these generations, you will soon account for more than 50% of the global workforce, particularly here in India, which has a very young population. And your generation are increasingly seeking meaning and purpose in their work. And once again, everything that we have seen at COVID, which is going to shape your generation the way the Great Depression and World War II and the struggle for independence structured your parents' and grandparents' generation, this will only accelerate this trend of the search for meaning and purpose in work. So we must make sustainable corporate lawyers. If the corporate legal profession hopes to attract today's talent, let alone the talent of tomorrow, it must demonstrate that corporate legal work provides meaning and allows for sustainable integration of professional and the personal. But these new corporate lawyers must be prepared for the challenges of pursuing these objectives in the new post-COVID world. This means that great educational institutions must not only teach students what Ben Heinemann and I in another paper called the core competencies of their own disciplines, meaning legal reasoning, legal research, legal institutions, but also the complementary competencies that will allow them to solve the multiplicity of urgent problems at the intersection of law, business, technology, public policy, and morality. As you just heard, Jindal's new blended program in corporate and financial law is dedicated to training such lawyers, to looking at the context of corporate law and social justice, corporate law and public law, the integration of technology, financial literacy, technical fluency. These are all a part of the program that you are joining, which is why I am so excited and honored to be here with you today. Thank you very much for listening to these remarks, and good luck to all of you in this inaugural and spectacular program. You have made a terrific decision, which, as Professor Kumar said, will undoubtedly pay off in multiple ways, not just for you and your career, but for India as a whole for years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for, as always, a fascinating and inspiring lecture. I deeply appreciate the extraordinary tour de force that you took, bringing and connecting issues relating to social justice, inequalities, and of course, the corporate legal profession as well. There are several questions that have come through, but I'll just respond to a couple of them. And I know you need to leave in exactly 5 minutes. So one question that many have, and I'm sure you will probably have thought about, is that, how do you connect the framework of corporations and corporate law in particular, being that, person who is asking the question whether it is right? As you know, another colleague of yours wrote an extraordinary book, which is called What Money Can't Buy, The Moral Limits of Markets, and in which Michael talked about the notions of the kind of greed that dominates the corporate discourse. In that context, how do you think corporate lawyers can effectively have their voice impacted in the corporation?
So Raj, I think this is the key issue, which the world is now focusing on. And again, I think that COVID and the protests around social justice are making this question one that corporate leaders can no longer avoid confronting. And lawyers are in a unique position to bring some of these important issues to the fore, in part because many questions around social justice are being incorporated into law. This is partly what I'm saying about the changes that we're saying. It's also true that those who invest in companies are now recognizing that companies that don't pay attention to these issues ultimately are not sustainable, and that the framework of the rule of law they need to survive will be eroded if we do not carefully pay attention to it and recognize the responsibilities of business to help to ensure its continued survival. Raj, it's not easy. And it's why, as I emphasize, the lawyers also have to understand the business imperatives and to understand that businesses in India and throughout the world operate in an increasingly competitive environment. But that competition will not be won unless companies are able to attract the top human talent. And that human talent, as I emphasized again, is increasingly looking for meaning and purpose in their work, and is able to work effectively with the public sector on those issues to which the business depends. Think again, and I'll stop here, and I have a few more minutes, Raj. I'm happy to take one or two more questions. Think about COVID. If we don't get the public health issues right, business cannot survive. Business can't even operate, can't even open. And yet, the governments can't get the public health issues right if business does not participate and cooperate. The US government is now spending billions of dollars with private companies to help develop a COVID vaccine. Neither the government alone nor the companies alone are able to accomplish this goal. They have to be able to work collaboratively. And that means we need lawyers who are broad enough in their outlook and in their education that they understand the public implications of the private decisions that their companies make in order to advise those companies in how to survive and thrive in this new environment. And that's why I'm so excited about the way you framed this program.
Thank you very much, David. There are several questions about the issues surrounding how globalization is actually under attack. In fact, even before COVID, we saw the signs of some of the fundamental values of multilateralism has been threatened, the evolution of Brexit, as well as other myopic decisions with regard to international trade. And also, even in your own country, the skepticism surrounding multilateralism. Now, you've been studying legal profession in China, in Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. So what do you see as the future of the legal profession, particularly when it comes to the corporate legal profession, as we move towards governments being more skeptical about the possibility of global engagement?
So another terrific question. And the fact of the matter is, sometimes people say to me, our project, as you know, Raj, that we've been working on around the world now, launched actually, to be very honest, when I came to Founders Day in August 2009. It's called Globalization Lawyers in Emerging Economies, or GLEE, as we like to call it, which the young people will recognize as the name of a popular TV show in the United States. And people have said to me, well, that age is over. I don't believe it. Now, you are right that there's governments around the world, and Brexit, and quite frankly, my government is very much in this camp, for better and for worse, I would say. I'm not going to talk politics here. That there's been a move towards trying to clamp down on globalization, but I would say that's a little bit like trying to stop running water. And all you have to say is COVID-19. I mean, how could you, what better argument that we have to understand that we live in a global context than the fact that we are now in the midst of a global pandemic, that no amount of closing borders is going to be able to stop. Instead, what we have to understand is how to manage globalization in a way that doesn't create the kinds of extreme inequalities that I think fairly the critics of globalization as it was sort of practiced in the first part of this century have rightly pointed out. That means that we have to think about global sustainability. After all, climate change. You cannot think about climate change on a local level. You cannot think about labor and employment rights on a local level. You cannot think about, media and culture on a local level. All of these things, corporations are deeply involved in, right? They are the products of government, but they are mostly the products of private business. You can't think about human rights without thinking about business on a global scale. I always say that one of the most fundamental human rights in the world is a job. And those jobs are increasingly the product of a global economy, notwithstanding the various barriers that people may put up about it. So I think your program, what it can do for these students is to help them to understand the complexities of globalization. Not that we no longer have to think about it, but that we have to think about it in an even more complex way than we have before. And then to understand how to better make globalization work for everyone. That might mean at some level, understanding how to cultivate local industries and how to protect people against the worst instability and excesses that may be caused by globalization. It may also be how to help people participate in globalization who had not participated in it before, and how to be a part of global institutions that are trying to create norms that will govern the global marketplace and the global human rights norms. Will this be easy again? No, it'll be incredibly difficult, but that's exactly why it's important that we have lawyers of the kind that are going to be trained in your program.
Thank you very much, David. One last question. This is about the future of corporate legal profession when it comes to building collaboration. One of the things that you touched about is that lawyers are good working in autonomous contexts. They steadfastly guard their space and the possibility of lawyers to work with people from other professions, including from the business world, including from the technology world, from the regulators, and possibly from accountants. That's always been a challenge. So the rise of the emergence of the new age corporate law firm, do you think that's going to be more collaborative and cooperative with other entities?
Listen, Raj, these questions just underscore why India is one of the most exciting places in the world, and where I'm very envious of the professors who are going to get to teach these students, because these are magnificent questions. So the answer is that lawyers, as you say, have been notoriously bad at this. But they are going to have to learn how to get better. And the first thing that they need to do is to stop calling everyone else a non-lawyer. Lawyers are the only people in the world who divide the world into lawyers and non-lawyers, as if these are two equal groups. Here's a hint. There are way more of people who are not lawyers than lawyers, and that lawyers need the multiple expertises of different professionals in order to solve the complex problems that lawyers are being asked to solve. Just think about what are the big issues in corporate law today, that people need to address. Think about climate change, think about cybersecurity, think about global credit, think about labor flows, think about human trafficking, think about all these things. These are not just legal problems. In fact, actually, I tell my corporate law students, and I teach, as you know, Raj, courses in leadership in law firms and leadership in corporate counsel. I've taught over 5,000 leading lawyers around the world in these positions. And I tell them all the time, I say, your clients don't have legal problems. They don't. They have problems, of which they would like to take the legal part if they were honest. And I bet my friend Ronnie at upGrad would agree with this. And they would like to reduce the legal part to as small a part as possible so they can concentrate on the part of the problem that they actually care about, which is the business part or the human resources part or the political part or all the other parts of the problem. Lawyers, if we are going to be a part of this important discussion, have to learn how to work collaboratively with professionals across a wide spectrum in order not just to provide legal advice, but to provide what clients actually want, which is what I call integrated solutions to complex problems at the intersection of law, technology, human resources, sociology, business, et cetera, et cetera. That has to begin in law schools and LLM programs like yours. And it's why I was very excited to see that you are focusing on these wider contexts and why this goes to the heart of the Jindal Global University, where even from the very beginning, the law school and the business school were built facing each other. And you have built out schools around public policy and social science and all the other international relations that are a part of creating a multidisciplinary problem-solving solution to the complex issues that we face in the world. And lawyers are getting better at this, but I would say to the students coming into this program, you are being put in a learning environment in which you will be able to become leaders in what is going to be the new multidisciplinary integrated solution problem solving of dealing with these complex issues.
Thank you very much, David, for your fascinating set of comments and responses. I deeply appreciate the time that you've taken, not only to deliver the lecture, but also take some of the questions. Once again, I wish you the very best, and thank you so much for being part of this commencement lecture. We can't wait to bring you back to India and to Jindal sooner than later.
Well, thank you, Raj, and thanks to all of you. Good luck with this important new program. And I do look forward to my next trip to India, which I hope will be soon, when I'll be able to perhaps give another lecture in person to the students.
Great. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Pratik, you may now resume the program as per our schedule.
Thank you, Professor Raj. Professor Wilkins certainly gave us some food for thought and introspection as lawyers and legal professionals. In the meantime, I'd like to invite Professor Anand Prakash Mishra to introduce the blended LLM program class of 2020. Professor Anand Prakash Mishra is a Director of Law Admissions at OP Jindal Global University. He's also Associate Professor of Legal Practice and Associate Dean, Admissions, Outreach and Institutional Building. He has spent over 15 years in the field of legal and higher education in both administrative and teaching capacities. I'd like to now invite Professor Anand to take the floor.
Very good evening, all of you. It's indeed a historic moment for all of us at Jindal Global Law School and upGrad. I must tell you, it's a historic moment even in postgraduate legal education in the country, when you have a class of 350 postgraduate law students from some 100 plus different cities and towns, and who have actually, who are representing over 200 organizations and institutions and firms and offices and companies and corporations. It's a very special LLM class, and a rare occasion in the history of legal education in the country. I pursued my LLM in old times in University of Delhi, Faculty of Law, and today it has been a sea change in postgraduate legal education in our country, with UGC taking the leadership in introducing the one-year LLM program. And at Jindal Global Law School, we are indeed very proud of the fact that we were one of the first law schools in the country to set up a dedicated center for postgraduate legal studies in the law school and start the one-year LLM program for the benefit of students. So to introduce this very special class, I would like to put few pointers. The first, I should say, the cities and towns where students, our learners who are coming from, it's not just Delhi and National Capital Region and Mumbai and the big metros like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Kolkata, and Pune. But there are students from Darbhanga in Bihar, from Jagdalpur, from Jamalpur, from Tirunelveli, from Dibrugarh and Imphal, from Patna and Lucknow, from Dehradun, from Jamshedpur, from Kumbhakonam, from around the country, from Goa, it's like a mini India. And I can imagine the kind of experience all the learners will be receiving in this program when you have a class with experienced lawyers and attorneys and practitioners, along with those who are freshers and having lesser work experience. So in our class, we have some 60 lawyers who have more than 10 years of experience. There are another 60 who have 5 to 10 years of experience, but then there are over 100 lawyers less than 5 years of experience. And we have another set of young law graduates who are freshers as well. I can imagine the kind of learning which is going to happen in the classrooms of our LLM blended learning program when the classes start on 1st of September. It's a very special occasion for me as a Director of Law Admissions of OP Jindal Global University that we started this program in association with upGrad. And it's such a great success. I actually congratulate each and every learner, each and every student who has decided to take it up. And I must tell them that it's going to be one of the best decisions of their lives and careers after 1 year when they will graduate with the LLM degree of OP Jindal Global University. And the credited courses in corporate and financial law by our distinguished faculty members, they will be certainly much improved legal professionals what they were before joining this program. So I'm very, very delighted. I would also like one interesting point to be put across. That's regarding this class of over 300 students who are part of LLM blended learning program come from some 100 plus law schools of this country. The 10 major universities and law schools are University of Mumbai, University of Delhi, Symbiosis Law School, Pune and Noida, OP Jindal Global University, Amity Law School, Noida, Christ University in Bangalore, ILS Law College, Pune, Karnataka State Law University, Calcutta University, Gujarat National Law University, National Law Institute University, Bhopal, and then there are graduates representing some 90 other law colleges and institutions from around the country, from Goa to Tamil Nadu, from Kerala to Kashmir. So I welcome you all, the learners, for this great experience. I welcome the faculty members who are going to teach this very special class It will be a great experience and even learning for the faculty members too, when they teach lawyers with practice experience, with law firm experience, with corporate legal departments experience. And I can see even those who are representing banks and insurance companies and legal process outsourcing companies and independent practitioners from different parts of the country. So welcome everyone. And I wish all the very best to all the students who have joined this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anand. I'm certainly, as a faculty who will be teaching, I'm very much looking forward to teaching all of you from such diverse and rich backgrounds. While we're on the topic of teaching, let me now introduce Professor Dr. S.G. Srijit, who will introduce the academic policies of JGLS, the rules and regulations really, which govern how Jindal Global Law School runs and which you all have to keep in mind. Professor Srijit is the Executive Dean of Jindal Global Law School. He holds an LLD with high honors from the University of Lapland, an MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and an MBL and LLB degrees both from the University of Kerala. He's also the author of several publications on international law and international legal thought. Professor Srijit, if you would take the floor.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody. Particularly on the policy part, I would tell you that we have created a very robust policy ecosystem within which this LLM blended program would be placed. We have particularly taken note of the uniqueness of this program and the uniqueness of the instruction which is going to happen there. At the moment, I really do not want to harp on all the policies. You all will be receiving the policy book from Professor Pradeep Bhattacharya, who's the Assistant Director of the Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies and the professor in charge of the LLM blended program. I would tell you a little bit about, I would draw insights from what Professor David Wilkins' brilliant lecture about what does it mean to study LLM, and particularly what does it mean to study LLM in the kind of framework we have created to you. Number one, it's a brilliant decision that you have decided to study LLM. Joining a PG program means you are about to undergo a microcosmic transformation. By microcosmic transformation, I mean that till now we have been recipients of the knowledge. Now we are going to get a kind of an enabling perspective whereby we'll put this knowledge we have gained in our graduate level in a thoughtful manner. That means that starting your PG program, as Milan Kundera's novel suggests, you're going to feel an unbearable lightness to your being. And then there will be an urge actually to get the heaviness back. That's exactly what the postgraduate program is going to provide. Now, Professor Wilkins mentioned about two competencies which you're going to develop. One is the core competency, and the other is the complementary competency. Now, if you look at the manner in which the courses are organized across the three trimesters, you will see that, there would be a gradual development of these competencies. Professor Pradeep Bhattacharya, in his introductory speech, mentioned about three core courses: Law and Justice in a Globalizing World, Comparative Public Law, and Legal Research Methodology. Now, these three courses combinedly will give you what we call as the core competency. Core competency is actually that enabling perspective which will help you locate your knowledge within the framework of social justice, within the framework of human values. Most important, this will also help you rediscover your own identity. We live in a world where we are all into some kind of a madness, but we would like to know why we have become mad. We would like to know the reasons for our own madness, our own uncanny idiosyncrasies. These courses actually collectively will provide us with that kind of an insights. Please note that Law and Justice in a Globalizing World will tell you what does it mean to live in a global society. Jindal Global Law School's choice of the expression global as its middle name is no accident. It's a well thought out choice. Global is actually the time space with all the complexities within which we live, within which we lead our time. We have to discover our identity in this time. So global is actually the time space. Global is a consciousness. Global is a mindset. The course Law and Justice in a Globalizing World will help us reinforce this mindset and help us at times turn autocritical about our own existence. So it's actually a process in self-discovery. I would urge you strongly to take this course very seriously, that you understand your own situationality within the global framework. I said that this is actually the way to overcome that lightness and become heavy, to feel the heaviness and the fullness of the being. You Also will learn comparative public law because, decisions are taken in a transnational space. Knowledge of the other is extremely important in the world whereby we live. Comparative public law will teach us what is the other and how to create a dialectic relationship between your own self, the legal system within which you have been brought up, and of course the otherness. Most important is the legal research methodology. Well, people often develop a kind of boredom towards this paper. They think that, well, research is something which we are not meant to. I'll tell you the difference between gaining knowledge through research and gaining through other means. When somebody teaches you, it's actually the teacher facilitating your knowledge. But research is always self-knowledge. That means that when a teacher teaches you, there will be a singular character to that knowledge. But when you research, you are actually exploring the knowledge as it appears to you. Now, it is this plurality which is going to make your curriculum, this is going to make your understanding far more richer. So please ensure that you develop the core competencies which Professor David Wilkins talked about so that you can become a sustainable lawyer in the modern times through the core courses. And then the subsequent trimesters will enable you to develop your complementary competencies, which you will be doing through many interesting specializations on corporations, on finance, on sustainable finance, and on competition law, and many such super specializations. So it's actually, a fine blend of both the core competencies and the complementary competencies that will ultimately make you what you call a global citizen. So the curriculum has been well thought out. We have spent many weeks and months designing this, even in the sequencing of the program, even in deciding the curriculum, even in organizing the knowledge in each subject which you're going to learn. So I'm sure that this will turn out to be a microcosmic experience for all of you. And I welcome you all on board Jindal Global Law School, and I'm sure that you will have a very productive 1 year with us. Thank you very much and welcome on board.
Thank you, Professor Srijit, for that detailed summary and that very executive summary by our executive dean. Let me now invite Professor Dr. Vishwas Devaiya to introduce the Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies, which is the overall body within which this blended LLM program has been envisaged. Professor Vishwas is the director of a Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies and the Vice Dean of Jindal Global Law School. His primary areas of interest are patent law, health law, and biotechnology law. He has worked as a research consultant for the World Health Organization and the Clinton Health Action Initiative, and has also co-founded the Initiative for Medicines Access and Knowledge, that is IMAC in New York. Professor Vishwas, if you would.
Vishwas, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Pratik. As Professor Srijit kind of mentioned, that you will develop the core competencies and there are complementary aspects that you will gain throughout the course. When CPGLS was conceived at JGLS, it was conceived to kind of incorporate postgraduate legal education in the form of LLM and PhD programs that are going to be offered as part of CPGLS. The center is established to offer advanced and interdisciplinary teaching, learning, and research opportunities in law for postgraduate students. Thereby, the aim is to create an intellectually stimulating academic environment with highly qualified, experienced, and dedicated faculty members committed to provide an excellent and world-class legal education, and that you will see as part of your various courses during the program. You have a blend of people who not only bring in their academic perspectives, they're also bringing in real-world perspectives. Most of them have practiced, they've been in the legal field for several years. In fact, one of the faculty members is 17 years as a law firm practitioner. And as part of CPGLS, the idea is to the vision of the OP Jindal Global Law University is to provide globalized legal education. The LLM program aims to equip students with skills to conduct research and legal issues from a global perspective, enabling them to think, innovate, and apply their knowledge to emerging global issues. That's largely the vision of CPGLS. And within that broader vision of CPGLS, we are kind of packaging the blended learning program in corporate and financial laws for you, which brings in a whole lot of global perspectives as well as kind of gives you that multi-dimension, which usually comes up with, cross-border transactions that tend to happen in modern times. That's largely what I've got to say, and congratulations to all of you, and hope the journey forward is an interesting one.
Thank you, Professor Vishwas. I'd like to invite Professor Jeremy Wade to introduce the Office of Academic Innovation and Blended Learning, of which he is the director. In addition, Professor Jeremy has also founded the Jindal Center for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which received the SEE Change Global Higher Education Institution Award at the University of Oxford for creating innovation in social entrepreneurship education through developing partnerships at regional, national, and international levels. Professor Jeremy, if you would.
Sure. Thanks. And first, let me extend a warm welcome to all the learners in this program. And you're pioneers, in fact, as the founding batch of this first of its kind program, this blended learning program. And there's nothing more that I get inspired by than is working with pioneering thinkers and doers. So let me just take a minute to introduce a new office at OP Jindal Global University, the Office of Academic Innovation and Blended Learning. So the aim of this office is to build an institutional vision of the future of education. And the core of that is to bring together great academic minds, faculty at JGU, with some of the best technology and collaborations, and to build new models, and to kind of pioneer in this by also developing cutting edge curriculum, by working with industry and these technologies. And in that way, I think we're able to co-create something of greater quality than we could probably ever imagine before. And another aspect of the office is a deep commitment to extending access to this kind of high quality education across India and across the world. And I think that is really the need of the hour, and to get education across the world. So with that, let me just quickly conclude and just say how excited I am about this program and this collaboration with upGrad for this first of its kind blended learning program. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jeremy. I would now like to invite Professor W. Sridhar Patnaik to deliver the vote of thanks. Professor Sridhar is the Registrar of OP Jindal Global University, and in this role, he contributes to the development and implementation of academic and administrative strategies for the university. In addition, his research interests are the international and humanitarian legal studies, comparative law, philosophy of law, globalization, and legal education. Professor Sridhar, if you would.
Thank you so much, Prateek. First of all, congratulations to Team JGU and even Team upGrad. It's indeed a historic moment. And while I take this opportunity to welcome everyone, I must even say that it's been a particular pleasure and a delight listening to Professor David Wilkins. We are immensely thankful to him for taking time out of his hectic schedules to address all of us with his insightful remarks on the topic that he had chosen to address this evening, reimagining lawyering in a world on fire, and the implications of the pandemic and protests and what it means for the future of the global market for corporate legal services. In fact, I must say that it's truly a delightful masterclass because it captured many areas of law and legal theory and global justice and international law, and even outlined the grounds for renewed training in corporate and financial law, and something that blends with our commitment. As a university, at the JGU, we place emphasis on quality learning opportunities, and we are committed to the academic curricula and professional integration of all learners into the LL.M blended learning program. and the LLM program is an important component of that particular commitment. As all of you would agree, and as even observed by Professor David Wilkins, the changes in the practice of law in the current day requires changes in the model of legal education. Therefore, while your career success requires specific skills that are comprehensive in nature, you need to even develop the core competencies that you had mentioned along with compassion. And it's also very important that there is a need for credibility, integrity, and development of a certain professional image, while at the same time, an opportunity that is part of this particular program is also to build networks and to build relationships that will have a hugely positive impact on your future careers. And this aptly captures the scenario in the field of law with the development of varied areas, and a master's degree in law in corporate and financial law will help you all augment your skill sets and competitiveness, because in the world that we all live in, humanistic knowledge, as David mentions, is more important, and thus higher education. And towards enhanced access, expertise, dissemination, navigation, and support, and creating opportunities for continuing legal education, that's even the mantra of the Bar Council of India, and successful completion of postgraduate legal education, we are glad we have partnered with upGrad. We are immensely grateful to Mr. Roni Screwvala and the leadership of upGrad for the partnership. And also we wish to thank our Vice Chancellor for his vision, enthusiasm, and leadership. And together, we at the upGrad and the OP Jindal Global University, along with all the learners of the first LLM program in blended learning, we can create what I would call, quote unquote, interesting times, citing David from an earlier rendition for access to higher education. In fact, the LLM blended learning program sets the right platform for interesting times, because the class of 2021, as many of my colleagues had already mentioned, will have a cumulative knowledge and grand years of experience that will make the classes lively, discursive, and engaging. In closing, I wish to thank our partners, upGrad, and colleagues from various offices at the JGU who had worked hard to curate this wonderful program. It is a collective effort. It is difficult to take all the names, but I would like to sincerely thank the leadership and members of upGrad, the faculty and staff of the Jindal Global Law School and the Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies at the Jindal Global Law School, and the Office of Admissions and Outreach, the Office of Academic Innovation and Blended Learning, most importantly, the Information Technology Office and the Communications Office and the Office of the Registrar and the Office of the Vice Chancellor for the contributions made to make this program a great success. I would also like to thank all the students for your active participation and everyone who attended the lecture. Before I close, I congratulate each one of you for being a part of the program, and my best wishes to everyone on a successful start of the academic year. The program has now ended. Thank you all.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.